To 2023. This is the January 10th, 2023 meeting, regular meeting of the Pinehurst Village Council. We'll be following this regular meeting by a work session tonight. If you are here in Assembly Hall and you wish to address the council in our public comments at the end of the regular meeting, please sign the list that's at the back of the room. The village clerk will eventually pick that up and bring it to me, and we'll call on you one by one for public comments at the end of the meeting. If you are listening to this meeting on the live stream, you can submit comments to the village clerk by emailing publiccomments@vopnc.org. It's public comments with 2 C's at vopnc.org. Those emails will be delivered to the village clerk, and she will circulate those to members of the village council and appropriate staff at a later date, but they will not be read at this meeting. Having called the meeting to order, we have a quorum of the village council. All the members are here tonight, the village manager as well, several members of staff, several people from the community. We look forward to hearing from you a little bit later. We'll move on from agenda item number 1 and go into our report section. And I'll call on Jeff Sanborn for his manager's report. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, John. I'd just like to talk about one thing, and that's an important opportunity for our community to engage with us and tell us what they'd like to see with regard to the future improvements to our parks and recreation opportunities in the village of Pinehurst. We're in the process right now of updating our Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and tomorrow at Cannon Park Community Center, we have 2 scheduled community drop-in sessions to allow folks to come in and provide perspective on what they think is important. The times for those are 10 to noon and 5 to 7. Again, that's at the Cannon Park Community Center. And for anybody that is not able to attend in person, you can still provide your valuable input by going to our Engage Pinehurst portal. The website for that is engage.vopnc.org, or you can just go to vopnc.org, our normal Village of Pinehurst website, and you can link directly over to our Engage Pinehurst portal from there.
Jeff, thanks very much. That's an important day tomorrow, and I hope everyone that's listening and here in Village Hall will make an attempt to participate in that. We'll move on then to reports from the Village Council regarding our contact with our partners and collaborators, and I would just have one report to make as well. As Jeff did, I was part of a Zoom call this morning with Moore County Partners in Progress. Partners in Progress has been in negotiations to acquire a piece of land south of Aberdeen that's part of an industrial park there that could be used by Partners in Progress when they're negotiating with companies who wish to come to Moore County or are looking for sites. These are small to medium-sized sites, and that loan was approved. It's being funded actually by a grant and also support from Moore County and from Aberdeen itself. And the purchase of the land is not concluded completely yet, but expected to be so in the near term, which will give Partners in Progress a working piece of land that can be made easily available to those who might want to center their business here in Moore County. That's my only report on partners and collaborators, so I'll move over. And Lydia, would you like to proceed?
Yes,
with
I would,
any
John.
reports?
Thank you very much. In December, I attended the board meeting of the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and they announced 2 new programs to get people from outside into Pinehurst, and people in Pinehurst more out into Moore County. And the first one is called the Pinecomb Pathways Program, and this is pretty neat. What they've done is they've contracted with Starworks to produce 100 of these, and CVB owns the mold, so there will only be 100. And starting in mid-March until Memorial Day, every week, they're going to put some of these pine cones into parks all over Moore County. And this is being done because the legislature declared that 2023 is the year of the trail in North Carolina to celebrate our amazing trails all over the state. So if you are they will be doing it in Pinehurst. I guess they'll probably coordinate with Park and Rec. But the way this will support local business, well, if you find one, there's going to be a little tag on it. It'll have a number and a QR code, so you can scan it, and they will take this off the grid and no, it's been found. But if you can't find one, you can go into a local business and get a hint as to where they can be found. So anyway, keep your eyes open for this. It's really, like I said, there will only be 100 of these, and it made me a nervous wreck to have these loaned to me to show you guys. So that's the first program, and the second one, last year they did a pour tour. It was, you got a passport, and you could go to various breweries around Moore County and get this stamped. And once you got it stamped, you could go to CVB and get a prize and be entered into a drawing for 2 free nights stay somewhere in Moore County. This year, they're doing a wine trail passport. I've got a few in the back of the room. If you're interested, you are not required to purchase alcohol at any of the places in this book, but you go in, you can buy, like they said, you can buy a package of nabs, get the passport stamped, and then take it to CVB. And this year, in connection with this, they'll do a drawing for a 2-night stay and a $250 gift card. So that's all I have. I'll leave these here if anybody would like to look at them. Thank you.
You're not going to hide it somewhere in Assembly Hall and we have to find it.
I'm afraid to. I might not get them back to CVB.
Thank you, Lydia. Patrick?
Yes, thank you. Happy New Year. I want to compliment the village and our residents who work so well on the Christmas decorations throughout the village. They really looked sharp. We had some visitors and they commented, so well done, village and residents who worked on that. Secondly, I wanted to mention the equestrian calendar is published every so often in the pilot, and there are a couple of upcoming events in January and February at our Pinehurst harness track dealing with dressage schooling shows. So residents who have an interest in that should feel free to attend, and it is open to the public, and you can go on to the dressage schooling show website and the sportingservices.net and get more information. I wanted to make a note during the Christmas season to compliment the Tin Whistles group who had a cleanup. They went out on a 29-degree morning and they picked up trash along Morganton Road. So it's a hearty group of individuals, and your fellow residents appreciate you. Thank you very much. Other items I wanted to mention is yesterday, along with Councilwoman Hogeman and Village Manager Sanborn, we attended a Neighborhood Advisory Council meeting, and there was a presentation made by the Village Manager regarding the traffic circle and a discussion on parking issues briefly in the village. So it was a full hour of a meeting and a lot of discussion. So those of you who know your representatives that attend the NAC meetings, you should feel free to talk with them, and if you want to bring something up at a meeting, or if you want to get some report on the feedback that took place at a meeting. Lastly, I did attend last week the Planning and Zoning Board, and they have been making terrific progress on the form-based codes in Village South. And the more I attend to them, the more I understand what form-based codes are, and so I get them now. And one of the comments that stuck with me from a variety of the discussion there had to do with something that I hadn't heard it put so distinctly before, but a member of the Planning and Zoning Board pointed out that Village South, and now with the announcement by the resort of the Pinehurst number 10, which takes place along that road, that that Highway 5 is really an entrance, a gateway to the village in the future, more so because of activities. And we should be conscious as a village about the streetscape that goes on there as we consider various proposals for development and so on. So I learned that, and I appreciated that education. And that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Pat, thank you. Jeff Morgan?
Just Happy New Year. Was able to take some of the downtime over the holiday season to spend a fair amount of time at the harness track, get a better understanding of what's going on there, looking at a lot of the improvements that have been made over the year. I think that those have been dramatic. Talking with some of the horse folks that are out there, the trainers, it seems like they certainly appreciate the investment that we've had on there. Looks like we're having an increase in the amount of folks that are there. Also, just to give a shout out and a thank you to our Parks and Rec folks like Scotty Freeman and some of the other folks who are working out there. One thing I did learn, I'm not a horse person, but every time it gets very cold and the ground starts to freeze, it requires a tremendous amount of attention from our folks to keep the tracks from freezing so the horses stay safe. And so it's a big effort, and as you all probably remember, the latter part of December, we had a lot of very cold weather. And so it required a lot of effort from them. So a shout out to our Parks and Rec folk on the efforts they've done and what's going on. If you haven't had a chance to look at some of the things that are going on out there, I encourage you to engage and see some of the great things that are happening on the horse track. So that's all. Thank you.
Jane?
Yes, I had an opportunity yesterday to meet with some members of the Pinehurst Business Partners, and they were describing the Village Christmas event that they worked together, collaborated with the village on, and they said it was a wonderful success, and they were particularly appreciative of everything that Parks and Rec had done, and they thought that it was wonderful to be able to work with them. They also, I'm glad to say, will be holding their late until 8 shopping on third Thursdays in the summer months again this year, because that also was a success. So that's all I know.
Jane, thanks very much. We'll move on to item number 3, which is a motion to approve the consent agenda. Before doing so, is there any part of the consent agenda that a member of the Village Council wishes to discuss or have brought out?
Yes, I do.
Patrick?
I'd like to briefly discuss the item that deals with the review of the 5-year financial forecast and the fund balance policy, and discuss the 5-year major capital needs. I wanted to discuss the 5-year major capital needs. I see Matt in the audience, and that may be helpful here. I looked at these carefully, and in reviewing them, I honestly do not recall how specific we got in the meeting, but I'm assuming it reflects the meeting that took place back then. And I find myself looking at these and thinking that we have maybe ought to consider flipping a couple of these items from in the 5-year plan versus being in the past the 5-year plan, and I'll get more specific right now. Some of the potential long-term capital needs included in the 5-year forecast are walkways, road resurfacing, stormwater improvements, library expansion, and so forth. There are 2, though, that I think we would be wiser to put further out. One is the parking facility construction, and the second is the West Pinehurst Park initial development. And what I would want to raise is the possibility of switching those with some things that we have in our further out list that I think are more urgent. Those are 2 items. One is, and they're both related to economic development. One is the public services relocation construction. I really think that needs to come before some of those items I just mentioned. And I also feel that way about the purchasing of the water tanks from Moore County. Now, we may not be purchasing them from them. Someone else may be purchasing them. I understand that. But I think those 2 items really belong earlier in our plan than the 2 I mentioned at the beginning, the parking facility construction and the West Pinehurst Park initial development. So I raised that with my fellow council members and staff, and please educate me or let
Well,
me know.
Pat, now, which date are you talking about? Is it on the 8th or the 9th? Which, it was a special meeting, I think, when we had our retreat, right?
School year plan, it was December.
So these are the minutes.
Yes, that's what I'm quoting from. That's what I pulled down and read carefully, and I
For
just thought
for
that-
clarity, Patrick, are you saying we need to change the minutes? Or are you saying that we need to have this conversation in the future
Yeah, that's
to
what I wanted.
discuss?
Well,
You-
no, I'm
you're
not- I'm
proposing
not-
a change.
I'm not questioning the accuracy of the minutes. Let me be clear about that. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm sure the minutes are probably absolutely correct. I just think we as a council need to think about rejuxtaposing some of those from the standpoint of an economic development, because the public services relocation construction and the water tanks are directly linked to what we're going to end up being able to do in Village Place.
Okay,
I
so
have-
the real point here is, I think the minutes are all right, but you want to have a discussion about the policy itself, which I think we need to schedule either at the council's desire later in this meeting, or depending on staff at the next time.
Staff is prepared to engage in that conversation. We don't have the materials in front of us. We haven't
Right.
given any
Okay.
thought to what you're suggesting.
Right.
We can
It's
check it up
about, I mean, these agenda items are about
Right.
approving the minutes and
Right.
their accuracy.
up this topic at another, I don't need it, we don't have that discussion right now.
Right.
But I'd like to put it on the table, because I do think there's an economic development aspect to those.
Sounds to me like a work session item, Jeff, maybe for our 24th of January meeting, something like that, depending on staff. Okay, we'll work to that end.
We can, I mean,
Jeff?
email, develop the plan, talk about the stuff.
Sure.
Like we usually do things, I think is appropriate. I think at this point in time, we're just talking about the minutes, though.
Yeah, no, I'm
I've got
fine.
no question on the minutes themselves and the accuracy of them.
No, I'm fine with the minutes, I was just taking this opportunity to point out those two items.
All right, well,
So
we'll come,
otherwise, I'm
we'll,
fine.
we'll plan a time for a discussion about that in
Thank
the
you.
near term. Otherwise, then, are there any other questions about these consent items? Lydia,
I was just going to make the motion.
please?
I move to approve all items listed and considered routine on the consent agenda.
I second.
That's a motion by Lydia Bosch, a second by Jeff Morgan. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries, and we move on to item number 4. Jeff?
All right, thank you, John. As Doug makes his way to the front table, what we have for your consideration is the draft contract with Oakley Collier for their design services pursuant to our efforts to improve the Given Memorial Library and Tufts Archives.
Thank you, Jeff.
Welcome, Doug.
Thank you. As you recall, last month we met and went over the proposal that Oakley Collier gave us. So this contract is in line with what that proposal was. So it'll be $140,000 for the schematic design services, which include the existing conditions, documentation, the programming, and the overall schematic design. After that, when we have a better idea of what we want the building to look like and have a good cost estimate for that, we'll go back and amend the contract for the full amount of what the architect's scope will be. We do have, I can go through the contract, or the agreement if you want, piece by piece, but maybe it's better if we just go, if any of the council members have questions. I will say that the agreement has been approved by staff, including village council. And as soon as we finish this contract, we'll reach out to the architects. They expect it'll take about 12 weeks for this schematic design phase to be completed. And then, in the spring, we'll be able to make decisions on how big we want it to be and what size and costs and things of that nature.
Doug, your reference to village council a minute ago was our legal counsel, I think, that they've reviewed the contract.
Yeah,
right?
that's what I meant.
Thank you. All right. Are there questions from the village council to Doug on this point? Jane, did you have a question?
Yeah, you answered my biggest question, because, obviously this is a legal document and it's complex, and it states at the beginning that there are changes from the standard American Institute of Architects form. And if you look down at the lines on the side, which indicate the changes, there's quite a number of them. So, and I don't know if any of us are in the position to understand whether the details of the verbiage are right, or whether the terms as they're spelled out are realistic for when staff is working with the architect. But that's the crux of my question. And so in Article 3, which is talking about Phase 1, section 3.2.3, it says that the architect will present its preliminary evaluation to the owner and discuss with the owner alternative approaches to design and construction of the project, and reach an understanding with the owner regarding the requirements of the product, after which it will get on with doing the preliminary design. When they say owner there, do they mean the council?
Yes, and I was very clear with them that before any decisions were made, they wanted, you as a village council wanted to meet with them and provide input and see where they were going with the design.
Right, great, thank you very much. In Article 1, in Section 1.1.6.1, it talks about sustainable objective. And I just wondered what that meant.
Give me 1 second.
I think it says, if the owner has a sustainable objective, then something's going to happen. How do you know if you've got one or not?
Yeah. I would have to follow up on
Yeah.
what they mean by sustainable objective. I will say, though, that this AIA contract is the standard. It's what almost all municipalities use when they enter into it. This is the 4th library reconstruction or construction project I've worked on, and they all use this AIA contract. And when we built the community center a few years ago, it was the same contract that we used back then. But I can look up what that sustainable
just-
objective means.
Just wondered what that meant. Okay, thank you.
Doesn't, just theorizing on that point, though, I think I've seen this before, and it normally has something to do either with environmental objectives of the construction, something like solar panels, water control usage,
Yeah.
and
Or if we wanted to
materials.
LEED
and
certified.
materials of the
yeah.
building, these sorts of things. That's,
Thank you, that's helpful.
so I'm comfortable with what that means generally and going from there. Are there other questions, Jane?
No.
Jeff Morgan, do you have, Patrick or Lydia, do you have any questions of Doug? Is it all right if we go ahead and approve this then, Jane, or are you
Oh, yeah, no,
on
it's
the
fine.
waiting of it? Okay. I believe we have a motion for this, unless there's any other comment from Doug about procedures going forward.
No, we'll reach out to them and then we'll put a schedule together and we'll let you know in the next, well, probably by email when to expect an opportunity to meet with them.
Good, good. All right, is there a motion number 4, please?
I move to approve the mayor as designee enter into an agreement with Oakley Collier Architects, a professional association for design services for Gibbons Memorial Library and Tufts Archives.
That's a motion by Jeff Morgan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Pizzella. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Doug, thanks very much.
Thank
Moving
you.
along. We'll move to item number 5, on-call engineering task order. Jeff?
Thanks, John. Mike Apke is coming forward to further describe this, but we have a standing task order contract with McGill for their kind of one-off engineering services that they provide in support of our efforts throughout the year. And I had previously approved a contract for $50,000 for those services. For a couple of reasons I think Mike is going to describe. We're going to exceed that $50,000 this year, so we need to come back to you for approval to continue that.
Correct, yep, thanks, Jeff. So yeah, as Jeff said, we utilize McGill Associates, their local office here in Pinehurst, for some on-call engineering services. Jeff executed a task order with them for FY '23. The services that they provide generally are, they help me with engineering site plan reviews. In certain cases, I do the majority of that work when a site plan comes in, do the engineering review. But if I get a lot in at one time, I utilize them to assist with that, and also they've helped with some of the larger scale site plan reviews. For instance, the First Health Cancer Center, they did the engineering plan review for that project as well. They do assist as well with construction inspections on commercial sites. They give us cost estimates for certain things and other kind of engineering consultation as needed. When Jeff executed the task order with them at the beginning of FY '23. We were hopeful we would be within his delegated authority of $50,000 for FY23. However, we were without an engineering technician. We have an engineering technician position in my department. That position was vacant from April to October. So, and one of the duties of that position is they do the construction inspection on commercial projects. So we relied pretty heavily on McGill in Q1 and Q2 for inspection services, and through December, we are at about $44,000 of our $50,000. When we talk about inspections, though, I just want to note, these are not like building inspections, things that our planning and inspections department does. They look at residential construction, they look at the actual buildings. We're talking about site inspections, so we're talking about roads and parking lots and stormwater systems and sidewalks and things like that. As you know, we have quite a bit going on right now, so we've used McGill thus far this year to assist with the USGA Golf House Pinehurst project, the First Health Cancer Center, the resort's greenhouse parking lot and access drive project, Hollycrest subdivision, and the CDSA building, which is a new building in Trotter Hills. 3 of those projects, the greenhouse parking lot, the cancer center, and the CDSA building are all at or near completion. So our need for inspections on those are less, but as you know, the USGA project is well underway. The Hollycrest subdivision is well underway, and I really feel like it's in our best interest to continue to utilize McGill to inspect those 2 projects. We'll probably also need some assistance with site plan reviews before the end of the year as well. So what I would suggest is we continue to utilize them throughout the course of those 2 projects. If we continue their services for FY23, I'm projecting that their fees for FY23 will not exceed $80,000. As I said, we're $44,000 into that already. And so what we're really asking is for council to ratify the previously executed task order that was executed by Jeff for an amount not to exceed $80,000. I will note, I'm not asking for any additional money. We have the money in our current FY23 public services budget. We may need to do a couple of budget amendments that are within Jeff's authority to do that, to move some money around, but we have the money to do this. The only reason I'm in front of you is because we believe we're going to exceed his authority to go to be at $50,000. We believe we're going to exceed that. So with that, I will entertain any questions.
Good explanation, Mike. Thank you for that. Other questions from council?
Just one question.
Lydia?
Okay, we were down an engineering technician for 6 months. We now have that person.
Correct.
But I understand your reasons for keeping McGill to continue with the project. So does the new engineering technician have enough to do?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And I will add to that, as we start up newer projects that we begin, we plan to do those inspections in-house as well. I just don't want to make a switch right in the middle of projects that are going on.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Good point. Any other questions? Is there a motion then to ratify this request?
Yeah, I move to approve the ratification of an on-call engineering task order dated July 1, 2022 with McGill Associates for the amount not to exceed $80,000.
That's a motion by Councilmember Pizzella. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jane Hogeman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Mike, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Happy digging. We'll move on then to item number 6, balanced scorecard presentation. Jeff?
John, it's hard to believe that we've, almost a month is already, maybe a little more than a month has already gone by, but back in early December, we all accomplished, I think, a lot of good work with the strategic retreat, and we got your initial guidance coming out of that. And this is our first kind of a touch point coming out of the retreat process, moving forward in our budget development for and SOP development for the next 5 years. And so Matt is going to present to you the proposed 24 balanced scorecard and areas of focus. We'd like to get your approval on those if possible, and then get your guidance on the initiative action plan list. Go ahead, Matt.
Thank you, Jeff. Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's nice to see you all again. As Jeff said, it is a little crazy to think it's been a little over a month since we started looking at FY 2024, but this is the first real step now from those meetings, looking at what you all had guided us on as staff to come forward with the balanced scorecard, including the goals, the strategic objectives, and the key performance indicators from there. as well as the areas of focus, as Jeff mentioned. And then the purpose of this meeting is if we are to receive your approval today on those items, that then we are going to be using that as our guidepost, essentially, to move forward at our kickoff for FY 2024 on January 25th. And at that point, then, as a reminder, we will go through, we will use that guidance through the departmental budgetary decision-making going forward over the next few months. So we're going to start looking at the balanced scorecard, and then once we move through that, then we will transition then to the initiative action plan item, which will be the second item on the list. So if we can, we'll move forward and pull that one up for them. So just as a reminder, the balanced scorecard indicates our proposed goals, our objectives, our key performance indicators, and our areas of focus, or our short-term goals. The three areas of focus from the strategic planning retreats were to develop codes and ordinances to protect the character of village neighborhoods, to support the business community, and third, to provide a safe and effective multimodal transportation system. And these three are, with some modifications, the same three that were from last year. I'll go over a couple of those changes here in a second. But we also did change some goal language as well as strategic objective language and KPI language through the retreats. So just as a reminder, I'll go through those. The first one I mentioned, well, I'll actually start with the goals. The second goal that you see on the screen there, we have moved that one to say from promoting high-quality development and appearance to now be amended to say promote high-quality neighborhoods, development, and appearance. Then we also, under that goal, we updated two strategic objectives. The first one is an area of focus. It previously stated manage development to protect village character. And we amended that now to say to develop codes and ordinances to protect the character of village neighborhoods. The second one on the screen underneath the second goal used to say enforce codes and ordinances. And through the strategic planning retreat, it was amended to say enforce codes and ordinances to protect the character of village neighborhoods. And then finally, we made an amendment to one of the key performance indicators, which is under goal 1, which was 1.3, which was property value saved as a percentage of property value at risk in fires. And through conversation, we both amended the KPI language to now say it's a 5-year rolling average, and then also updated the short-term and long-term projection goals based off of what that 5-year rolling average would look like.
A question.
Yes.
Why do we think the 5-year rolling average will be much less than what was actually in
So
FY '22? 14 points less, as much as 14 points.
Yes, sir. So as of right now, we're still collecting. This is still a new KPI. So right now, we've made the short and long-term goal of saying that anything above 85%, we believe that should be the goal. However, as we continue to get more information over the years, as you can see, FY '22 was 99%, and we believe it's going to be 99% going in FY '23. Those goals are actually going to start becoming more concrete, I would say, over time. So I would say we're at very early stages of those short-term and long-term goals. The projections themselves are above 85%, but we don't show those projections on this on the scorecard. We show the goals. And then, like I said, over the next couple of years, the goals will go from greater than 85%, and I would say it will probably tighten up to be greater than 90% or 92% based off of what the rolling average looks like.
Matt, are you saying then that the data that's shown there under actual for FY '22 and estimated for '23 is the annual number and it's not yet the annual, the 5-year rolling average?
So as of right now, the 22 and the 23, and I have to go off of my memory here, I believe both of those, the latest information that we have is a 3-year average, 3 or 4-year average. So I believe FY '23 is showing a 4-year rolling average. 22 is a 3-year average, because again, going back on that data, but then going forward, now going into 24, we'll start having that 5-year rolling average. And now actually, I'll make a note on this one as well with an asterisk to point out what those updates look like. Yes. And so As I mentioned before,
One of those data points where if we have one catastrophic event, it could skew this very heavily. And that's part of the reason we said we wanted to have a 5-year rolling average, because
yes. And we're very close to getting that, and what we will do, and I'll double check to make sure to see whether or not we can build back further to ensure that that 22 is there. As I mentioned, I know for a fact with going and looking back at the data, it's at least a 3-year rolling average on that one, if not a 4-year rolling average, but I just have to confirm. And so, as I mentioned, though, the goal after today is, if this is approved, then we will move forward with kicking off on January 25th. And so I'm happy to answer any other questions that you all may have.
I have none, but other council members may. Anybody have a point? And you just want to talk about the balanced scorecard before we get to the,
Yes, specifically, yes, sir.
okay.
I've got one, I want to make sure I'm reading it correctly. The only numbers that do not have percentage signs after them are the crimes per rate number. Okay, so what does that number mean from 32 actual to 39 estimate? Is that going in the right direction, the wrong direction? What does that mean?
Which number are you dealing with here?
I'm dealing with
1.6?
1.6.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, so there are two ways of reading it, right? In actual FY in 22, you can see it was 32, and we are projecting FY 23 to be 39. I don't have the specific projection modeling in front of me as to the decision-making around that. I would say in general, most of this is based off of trend analysis over, a period of 3 to 5 years. So what you see, though, is that the goal is below 40 for both short-term and long-term. And so our projections may waver, again, over time around that number, but ultimately our goal is to make sure we're below 40. And right now, we are estimating that we will meet that goal in FY 23.
next, at your next meeting, you're going to get your semi-annual update on our police stats. I think what you're going to see from those stats is that's being very heavily influenced by all this bank account fraud stuff that's we've been hearing a lot about and experiencing.
Thank you.
Matt, what's our benchmark on this? Do we look at benchmarks when we set some of these? For example, I mean, I hear what Pat's saying, like the number's gone up, but do we look at a benchmark and consider how we're doing compared to comparable communities?
Absolutely, yes, ma'am. And so we do that both during the strategic planning retreats and the pre-retreats with the data dump that essentially that we do. We pull a lot of benchmark communities through that, but then also both in the balanced scorecard KPIs as well as in the departmental KPIs, we have a full list of both local as well as what I consider best practice benchmark communities that we look at to ensure that, one, where we are doing compared to those communities, and then also to understand where we are, whether or not our goals and our projections are within ranges that that are, acceptable and that we expect as well.
And it sounds like what you're saying, we tie that back into this, or this is tied to that. There's a correlation between the benchmarks and how we set this.
It's definitely a part of the discussion when we're looking at our goal creation and our projection methodology. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Other questions on the balanced scorecard? And Jeff, thanks for reminding us. We'll get an update on the current year, which will help verify some of these going forward. Thank you. All right, you want to move on then, Matt?
Before, if possible, it would be, there is a motion in front of you. If you would like to, we can either move on that motion now around the balanced scorecard before moving to the initiative action plan document, or we can take the motion up at the end, whatever council would like to do.
Well, I guess my only curiosity is the items in red.
Yes.
Those are the ones we've made changes to.
Right.
Right.
The ones in red are the areas of focus.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
okay.
They were changed.
Is there anything there that you want to point out to us? So again, my eyes get drawn to the ones that are not percentage basis. So obviously the collisions, remind us that collisions include people crashing into our police cars, right?
All the ones that don't have a percentage, they're stated on there, so it's a rate. So it's a 38 collisions per 1,000 residents.
Yeah.
So you could end up making a percentage if you wanted. okay? But it's a rate, so a rate doesn't have that, it's unitless.
But the number, the raw number, the 38, the 35, and so forth, remind me what's included in those collisions.
I would have to go back, from my memory, it is the number of reported collisions.
Vehicle-related
Yes.
collisions,
Yeah,
whether it's with
vehicle-related
other
reported.
vehicles, with trees, with pedestrians,
Trees,
with.
other
you know,
vehicles, okay. It's just not a traffic.
Mentioned pedestrians, that happens very rarely, but.
Right,
Yeah.
okay. All right. I was just trying to refresh my memory. Thank you.
I don't think it involves golf carts, though. Unless
what-
it's a car hitting a golf cart.
Cars sitting golf
Good
carts,
point.
yeah. Matt, you asked if we want to do the motion now. The motion does only cover the balanced scorecard, I think. So
Yes, sir.
we could do that now, and we'll get into the with KPIs, right? As a separate discussion?
All right, to the initiative action plan would be a separate discussion, yes, sir.
Well, but on
Okay.
the other hand, I've got a couple questions about the initiative action plan that may go back to the balanced scorecard.
Well, then why don't we hold the motion?
Come back to it.
Absolutely. Okay,
Good point. Carry on, Matt.
absolutely. So
Thank you.
turning
Thank you,
our,
Jay.
turning our attention then to the initiative action plan document in front of you. So through the discussion during the strategic planning retreat, I keep wanting to say this year, but technically it was last year, we identified 7 initiative action plan proposals within the 5-year plan. And then as a reminder for yourself, but mostly for those listening behind me and at home, initiative action plan items are those defined measurable activities needed to address certain opportunities that may involve a significant amount of financial or staff resources or have a significant community impact. There are many other projects that align to these strategic objectives that we call opportunities for improvement or innovation. And so for some people who may be looking at this going, is this maybe the only item that we may be doing within the work within this category? There are many other projects and evaluations that will be aligned to this, but these are those significant staff and financial resource elements that were identified. As I mentioned, there are 7 of them. I'll go over them briefly for you. Design building, staffing, and equipping Fire Station 93 at the end of the strategic planning retreat was identified for an FY28 start. Relocation of public services complex to allow for redevelopment of Village Place. I know that there was a brief discussion briefly before about that one.
Help me understand that. Here it says, on the screen, it's talking about FY 24, 25.
Yes.
Earlier, this morning when I caught this, it seemed to be past 2027. So that's what's confusing me.
So according to my notes from the strategic planning retreat, the relocation of the public services complex is specifically around, it's really around the design element of it, which would be, or not the design, I'm sorry, the actual finding the location space is slated for FY24 and FY25.
And design, I think.
And
Yeah.
design, yes. So I think the relocation is FY24, which was currently at a $0 amount, and FY25, I think, had a $75,000 amount, I believe.
Okay, the wording earlier said public services relocation construction. So I'm going to get wording specific, which has it past 2027.
Could you, Pat, is this on a,
That's the minutes of the special meeting of December 9th.
oh, yes. Yeah, and that's a good point, so thank you for that clarification. So as of right now, what this is showing to you, it's specifically the initiative action plan item that is for finding relocation, the relocation space, and the design. So at the time, once this is done, then the next conversation comes into play of the actual movement, build, et cetera, which would be either an amendment to this initiative action plan or a new initiative action plan item.
Are either of these considered long-term capital needs? Is this a long-term capital need right in front of us here on the screen? Relocation of the public service complex to allow for redevelopment of Village Place?
Look at Jeff for this, yes.
Yeah, well, I think, yes, on one or two fronts. If we have to acquire land to accommodate that, then that would happen in this 24 timeframe, hopefully, or 25 if need be. That would be a long-term capital need. And then the construction, which I think what we're seeing, what Matt is describing is that this IAP actually spans 24 and 25 and the out years, but we're only seeing the identification of a location, potential purchase of land, and design work.
Well, I understand that because, again, the minutes say construction, which that word is not here.
Construction is, I guess what I'm saying, it would be included in the IAP, but it's in the out years, so you're not seeing
Okay,
it here.
well,
Yeah.
That's helpful, and when we have our other discussion, we can nail it down more, but I get it now. Okay.
Now, I happen to have the five-year capital plan form here, and that shows $350,000 in FY '23 and $75,000 in FY '24 for public services, alternate location, and site plan. So that's
right.
That's what we're doing now, and those are the numbers that are tied to that.
Yeah,
Full-
I mistakenly said 75,000 in FY '25. It's FY '24, it's the $75,000 currently within the plan.
Right.
And- Yes.
Right. So that's, I think that consistent.
And the 350,000 is in the current year budget.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Okay, are there, Pat, did you have another question
No,
on
no,
on that
that's
point of it?
help-
You want to continue on, Matt?
Moving on, there are two items. So there are two initiative action plan items, as you can see, that are underneath this area of focus around developing codes and ordinances to protect the character of village neighborhoods. The first one was the relocation. The second one is to update the PDO. And that was just a continuation of a current IAP as well, that is just been extended into FY '24. Moving on to the next item, to support the business community, that area of focus, there is one IAP, which is to expand downtown parking facilities. And through the discussion at the strategic planning retreat, at the time it was decided to move the initial phases from starting in FY '24 into FY '25 and then into those out years. So 25 through 28 is what the current look is. And if I'm looking at it right now, FY '25, again, according to the conversation, was actually a non-monetary amount associated with FY '25, but the actual beginning design and then build would start in FY '26 into FY '27. So just to give you an idea, currently there are X's there because as a part of this conversation and getting guidance from you all, we're going to take this information back and start developing the budget. But in regards to what you're actually seeing up there, although it says FY 25 through 28, I'm just, as a reminder, we did shift those monetary amounts out 1 year.
I think it's important to note maybe that, that what we have indicated here is kind of a best case or
Yes.
earliest possible, recognizing the fact that we're not in control of our own destiny on this, and we have to negotiate with another entity to potentially make this happen. But based on what they told us about a year ago, the earliest this could start is sometime after the U.S. Open.
And I want to point out again, I'm the broken record here. I still struggle with what support the business community is. What does it mean? What does support mean? Who is our business community? And we don't have to talk about this now, but if we want to support the business community, I think it's worth a discussion to talk about what that means, how we're going to do it, in something other than parking. But also, I think we've talked about in connection with the library expansion, we may have to have some parking, which might work its way into this. But, I'm still grappling with what support the business community means.
And Lydia, on that question, which we did talk a bit about during our retreat, what does that mean? And you've raised it again. Partial answer, and for the future development, is the things that Jane's trying to do in communicating with Pinehurst Business Partners, which is a part of the business community, but certainly not all of it, but then working with folks like Jeff Batten to define and arrange outreach to other members of the business community. So there's a lot behind that, I think, but it does deserve further discussion. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
And I had also.
Jane?
It was my understanding that everybody from McAdams to our own staff to ourselves who are familiar with the downtown, that there's enough parking. It's just a matter of managing the parking. So I'm kind of surprised to see that we're still plugging away at doing a great big parking. I mean, there may be a few parking spaces here or there that'd be helpful to eke out, around the new library and that kind of thing. But I'm really surprised to see this project of building a carriage house on here at all.
Well, if I can,
going on there, I think that, a big part of what drove us to this framework a few years ago was the expansion of the library and archives, and the likelihood that that expansion was going to take place on the village green. So we recognized if we're going to create a more capable library and archives experience for our community, it was going to drive more people to those facilities, and we would need more parking for that. And we also had the idea that if we were able to negotiate something like this, then ultimately what we could do is remove some of the existing parking in the sandlot, parking lot on the village green in order to make what we're doing more palatable to the Park Service and to our ultimate desires to continue to honor our heritage and keep that green a viable place.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Matt?
The next item that you'll see on, down a little bit further underneath promote active living and cultural opportunities is to provide recreation programs and facilities. Specifically, the IAP is retrofitting current athletic fields with synthetic turf. And the current, through the strategic planning retreat, this was scheduled from FY24 through FY27. Then FY28, there was discussion about, at that point, then looking at evaluating Wicker Park and potentially, and the wear and tear on Wicker Park. So that's why you don't see FY28 as a part of that one. And then underneath that, we have the IAP to expand and renovate Given Library and Tufts Archives, which is from FY24 through FY28. And FY28, the one big change on this one through the conversations is we are going to be building in, or we were planning on building in, the operational cost starting in FY28. So that's why you'll see that as a part of the IAP. So that is the current initiative action plan list with its alignment to our strategic objectives, our areas of focus, and our goals. I'm happy to answer any other questions that you all may have.
Are there other questions? Jane, you said you might have had others? Jeff Morgan? Pat?
Nope.
Lydia? If there are no other questions, then I think we might move, unless Matt has any other follow-up points for us, we might move to the motion, which we discussed a little while ago. Motion number 6.
I move to approve the FY 2024 balanced scorecard, including the FY 2024 areas of focus for the Village of Pinehurst.
It's motion by Jeff Morgan. Is there a second?
second,
Second by Pat Pizzell. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Matt, thanks for your good work.
Thank you all so much.
We'll hear from you in 2 weeks about where we are on the current plan. Right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Before we transition, I think Pat made the observation earlier when we're looking at the minutes that maybe there were a perception that maybe we need to move forward the construction of the public services complex.
yeah, we don't have to discuss it now, but I just think from a planning standpoint, because it's so linked with economic development, that, and I realize you can't put the cart before the horse, we gotta do certain things.
Maybe as we move forward, we might look for an opportunity to.
Yes, I mean, I just think that is vital to our success down there, and much more important than some of the other items that we can wait on. So we can discuss that.
Anybody opposed to that? That
Say again,
suggestion?
Jeff?
Anybody opposed to that suggestion? Just looking for the opportunity to move that forward in the.
I am not.
No.
I'm not opposed, no. I think there's a consensus there to discuss.
Yeah, I'm fine with discussing it, sure.
Thank you all.
Matt, thanks again. Moving on to our next item, item number 7. I think we'll depend on the clerk a little bit for this, Jeff. Kelly?
I guess I can introduce this, John.
Okay, fine.
We were recently contacted by the League of Municipalities with respect to their development of their biennial legislative goals and priorities. Of course, the League of Municipalities does a lot of lobbying of the General Assembly on behalf of the cities and towns across North Carolina, and so they were looking for feedback. So there's 2 things that we need to accomplish. One is to appoint a designated voting member for the Village of Pinehurst, and then also to settle on what feedback we're going to provide to the League of Municipalities with regard to their proposed priorities. Kelly?
I want to thank Kelly for assembling this information and putting it in a very interesting format for us with a bar chart on the one hand and a pie chart on the other. So Kelly, go ahead and lead us through what you found.
Okay, I'll try to see if this will reach from over here. The first thing that we did was we did collect rankings from each one of you individually to find out within those 16 legislative goals that they had put out and proposed, which you felt were the focus area for the village of Pinehurst. So this was the initial chart of all 16 of the legislative goals, and this is how the rankings were. So I took the votes by individuals. So you'll note that it was up through 1 through the 5 votes. So I'm going to scroll on down. So here is the actual findings of what we came up with, and you will note that all council members chose law enforcement as a high priority. Then you will see, so that's this one, we had full percentage. So then I took that totals, and instead of 10 priorities, which you would ask for, I stopped at 9, because at that rate, it began to dwindle down to that there were only maybe 2 council members chose that, and then there was no specific priority for that. It was down far in their list. So this is in the priority list from the consensus of all the council members. So you'll see 1 was, again, for officer recruitment. And then you can take for the 10th mayor, these numbers and council members where there were only 1 or 2 votes. So those were the remainder. So. So some of the results that came in, you did not prioritize, you just listed the ones that you chose. But based on the numbers again, I pulled number 1 was with the most votes, 5. Number 2, 3, and 4 were each received 4 votes. And then the remainder received 3.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly, when I sent you mine, I prioritized them 1 through 10
Correct.
on there. Did you all prioritize them 1 through 10, or did you just select 10 with no priorities on them?
I just selected 10.
Okay.
I didn't try to prioritize. I did number them, and then I selected 10.
Well,
How did you do it, Jeff?
Well, I did it with a priority on there, and the intent on that was that we'd end up being able mathematically to look at it, saying what are the top priorities, and you would not have the ties on there. So effectively, what we have on the data here is that you have in 9 categories, 3 out of 5 council members have stated this is on their top 10, okay? And I see that, but it gets watered down by not having that, in other words. So if you may have voted, it might have been on your agenda just because, hey, I want to put the 10th one on there, and it now made it to 3 votes. You know what I'm saying there?
I just put
Okay.
my top 7.
Okay. So and without going to the math, bottom line to it is, just because you got 3 votes doesn't mean statistically we have a very strong argument saying we really feel strongly about that. So in our conversation now, I would encourage us to look at certainly the top ones on there. When you got certainly 5 votes coming in there, you got maybe a top 5 we want to look at on there, and if there's something else in there that we look at it, we are probably going to be better off in obtaining a consensus here where we want to go. That's what I'm saying. Does that make sense?
Yes, but what you're saying, I think what you're saying is, let's just take those where there's 4 or more.
No, I'm not just saying that. I said, let's have a discussion on there. But the data that's being presented right here, just because you have 3 votes, the way it was done, does not mean that it's a strong feeling that, hey, let's go that direction, okay? Take it with a grain of salt. That's all I'm saying. Okay? Certainly if 5 votes, that signifies to me that's pretty strong from what the council wants.
There are
Maybe
16
an approach would
categories.
be.
Jeff, go ahead.
Maybe an approach would be if one or more of you have things that you felt strongly about that are not on this list, then we can have a conversation about those things.
Fair enough.
I've got a couple that are made the list that I question. And I'd be able to just run through them very quickly. The first is item number 2, which is to expand broadband. And I don't have a problem with expanding broadband where it's needed. And I actually put it down as one of my 10 because I was struggling to find 10. But I think that's probably not a top Pinehurst priority because I think we're probably pretty well provided for, luckily, for broadband. But I don't mind it being one of the League of Municipalities priorities, but I just mentioned that.
Same thought I do on it.
Yeah. The second one, though, is item number 8, to make voluntary annexations easier to initiate, which sounds good until you read the way they would do it. Because right now, in order to have a voluntary annexation of a tract of land, the owners of all the different parcels that make up that tract have to agree to be annexed. And what they want to do is water that down. They haven't said, is it going to be 75% or 60% or 50%? They haven't said that, but they'd water it down, which means that if you happen to own a parcel within that tract, you might end up being involuntarily annexed. And that, I think, is something that the legislature tried to move away from, involuntary annexation. So I do have a question about making that a priority. And then the third one I wondered about is item number 7, regionalization of water and sewer services. Does that discourage annexation?
Yeah, I think it might. I mean, if you could draw a direct parallel and
Right.
analogy to our experiences here in Pinehurst,
Right.
Because we don't have a water and sewer system.
So maybe we don't necessarily want to promote that. I mean, I can see where for little tiny towns in a great big county that would be helpful, but I don't know from our point of view that it is helpful. So those are my 3.
Yeah, I can speak to the annexation, obviously. In an involuntary annexation, you don't have a voice at all. With number 8, if there's, let's say there's a piece of land that's got 100 homes on it and 99 want to be annexed and 1 doesn't, at least they have a voice. And I have a problem with that one voice holding up the other 99 who want to be annexed. And so I have no problem with changing it from 100%, and I think the legislature can grapple with what it needs to be. But to require every property owner, at least they have a voice, and to require 100% agreement may stall the wishes of the vast majority of the property owners who do want to be annexed.
So you could carve out the people who don't want to be annexed.
What if they're in the middle of the property?
And have these little islands that, I mean, it doesn't-
Yeah. And again, annexation's been such a hot topic that the legislature will work its way to the best percentage, but I think it's reasonable for them to have this discussion.
When you said number 8, are you talking about the priorities? Because actually, I think you're talking about number, is it 14 on there for annexation?
Number 8 on this backside, update annexation petition.
Talking about the ones on the
Yeah,
south.
we're using.
Ones on the, okay, so that's why you're referring to those, okay, good enough. Yeah, because in the original chart where you're looking at, it's a different number, that's fine.
And I agree with you guys about the broadband. Number 9, provide authority to municipal water systems. We don't have a municipal water system. So I wasn't quite sure how that fit on there. Jeff Morgan, I do see your point about about having a more weighted selection process rather than just number of votes. I don't know how we get there.
Well, at this stage, I'm not sure we need to. It would have just given more weight as to what we're doing, whatever. The point of it is hearing these conversations, I concur with, what you're saying on the broadband. I had that very low in my priorities. We can look at this as saying, do we want to have 5 different topics that you're taking forward? We're looking at 6 different topics. What's,
Question.
Mayor, I
Kelly,
did
do you recall, and I'm thinking,
10.
was there a request to prioritize these? I don't think there was on
No.
the NCLM document.
When I looked at the document that you will have to fill in, it does ask that you mark 10.
Sorry, say again?
When I looked at the document that you will be required to cast the vote on, you are required to list 10.
Required to list
Required?
10.
Yes.
Okay, but they're not in priority order, they're just, yeah.
No, sir.
I think it's for the NCLM to determine
Yes.
maybe the priorities of these based upon
Right.
the gross number of responses they get to the 210.
Yeah, so then I think that goes on January 25th then
Yeah.
to the actual legislature.
So they really do want to see 10 responses.
Correct.
All right, well, we're not.
Where's our 10th one? What's missing off this backside?
So the ones
Well,
that,
the 9 we have are at least 3 council members, and that's about half of them are 3 of us, and the others are 4 to 5.
correct.
So I'm comfortable that that's a reasonable representation, even with some of the conversation we've had here. Is there another,
So the following 4 then that received 2 votes would be the next obvious choice if you have to pick for that 10th one.
Finalize vacant and abandoned properties.
The pie chart?
the pie chart only has the 9.
Yeah.
Oh, it does, okay.
Yeah,
All
it's
right.
just the top 9 and the percentage of each. If I'm looking at the bar chart, I'm looking for the lower ranked responses.
Number 4 is 1, number 2 would be 1.
2 on your bar chart list, not numbered now, but
Correct. No, on this particular page.
Checking the
on
colors here is a little-
On the list of the 16 choices. Number 2, which would be this one.
what one I was looking at was the brownish bar in the middle there,
This
which only
one?
had 2 responses, but it
That
has
is
to do
number
with
8.
Public
state funding from
transportation.
public transportation.
We don't have public transportation.
One thing that came
And-
up,
Well, the 4 that got 2 votes are revitalize vacant and abandoned properties with enhanced legal tools and funding, increase state funding for public transportation operations, provide state assistance for yearly financial audits, ensuring that an adequate number of auditors is available, and then the last one is provide local revenue options beyond property tax.
let me just the auditor one once. We heard from our financial services head a couple of times in the past year about the difficulty of finding auditors. And I think one of the questions I asked is, how come we've had the same auditor all these? Well, there's no competition. It's understandable, I accept that. So I don't know if that's something that we ought to,
Yeah,
I assume
I'm
it's a
in for number
statewide
12.
problem, and it might be something that being encouraged.
I'm going for 12. I think that if, particularly a small town,
Local option?
that the assistance with financial auditing is going to be great because that's going to And that's going to be good for the towns and for the people who live in the towns. I mean, I don't think we have, a difficulty with it here because we're so lucky to have such a great financial staff, but I think for a lot of towns, that could be a real help.
This is the one with the green bar, is that not correct? Wait a minute, no, it's,
Very last.
Yes,
Dark
it's the
green
green
is
one.
provide us, is that one, yeah.
Green, yeah.
that's it. Auditing assistance. Yeah, I was troubled by the fact that auditors for municipalities are difficult to find, and as Pat mentioned, it's been something that's been pointed out to us, although we don't have a problem, but others do because of the lack of auditors.
Strikes me that it's a private market. I mean, what is the General Assembly going to do?
Yeah, I don't know what they're going to do, but it's-
I don't know what they're going to do with some of these, not
Offer
just
some
this one.
training or to staff people who could use it. I don't know, something.
John, didn't you ask our auditor if they plan to continue this line of service?
I did, and they said yes.
Yeah.
And in fact, the merger that they've had is with another firm that it already has a municipal practice of its own. So I think they're going to continue in that business to our benefit and others that use them. But that's not true across the state.
Oh, but that came to mind as I was looking at that one.
I have no problem supporting the financial auditor stuff.
Perhaps this audit assistance is something in our best interest because it's in the best interest of the fiscal responsibility and success of other towns. All right, why don't we include that as number 10?
So
Okay.
we have our 10, right?
That's right,
We are
excellent.
10.
Thank you, Kelly.
Kelly, thank you
Thank
for
you,
that.
Council.
Now, we have a motion here because I need to be the voting delegate, and we have a couple days to get our responses in, which shouldn't be a problem. So we have motion number 7, please.
I move to approve Mayor John Strickland to be the single voting delegate who will cast the Village of Pinehurst vote on January 12, 2023, submitting the agreed-upon 10 proposed legislative goals for the 2023-2024 legislative biennium.
That's a motion by Pat Pizzella. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jane Hogeman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. The motion carries. Thank you all very much. Okay, we'll move on here to other items. Is there any other business to come before the regular meeting? Jeff,
Just like,
anything from
one
staff?
thing that I think we need to consider in the future, possibly during our working session, but we have had a fair amount of inflation. We've talked before about the village manager having delegated authorities. Not that I've heard him ever ask on this, but we may want to consider raising the limits on what he's allowed to authorize on his own, just because of the increase in inflation. Later conversation, that's all I've got.
Are there other business or recommendations for future meetings, such as just made by Jeff Morgan?
What I mentioned earlier.
And now, yes, we have
Yeah.
that.
And,
Anything else? And is there any other business for discussion then? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to comments from attendees. I'll get the list from Kelly. As Kelly is coming up, I'll just remind everyone, there are two. Make your comments directly to all the council members, not a single council member. Try to keep your comments to 3 minutes. I can be a little flexible on that. And use discretion in your following on another speaker if there's any redundancy. The first speaker is John Root. That'll be followed by Teresa Johns. Now, I'm noticing that both of you have comments about the traffic circle, which is just fine. So we look forward to that, and we'll be interested in your comments. And John Root, you are first. I know you've asked and you've brought some slides to show us, which I think had been, some months ago, you were good enough to forward a couple of those to us, John. And if it's all right with the council, I've agreed with Mr. Root to have those slides shown so we can demonstrate what his points are.
Good afternoon. Read the story in the paper Sunday, and it seems that we either have, as a community, need to get on or off the pot. And the paper says we have three options: to do nothing, or to build a bridge, which seems totally out of character, but it would take, apparently it would be continuous traffic for 211, or to build what they're calling a continuous flow intersection, which is there on the thing. And it really, to me, comes down to trading a forest of trees for a forest of traffic lights. Continuous flow is a nice word, or set of words, but there's traffic lights all over the place in order to make it, quote, continuous flow. I think there's another solution, and that I would like to present to you, and it goes underneath the circle. 15501 goes straight through. 211, the two highways, comes up and goes over the top of 15501. All of that is underneath the surface of the circle. The circle functions as it does today. And I've shown this model to the Highway Department in Raleigh, the one here in Aberdeen. I showed it to the people in Raleigh, it's got to be 8 years ago, and recently showed it to the people in Aberdeen. It is continuous flow. There is no interruption for 15501, and there's no interruption for 211. It will take all the traffic, highway, not only the cars, but trucks and semis to go there. I've had some conversation with, quote, the engineers, and they said, well, it's going to interrupt the traffic circle for 2 years. Well, one solution is to do all the work inside the circle and then just do the outside, and could be done in a relatively short period of time. The other thing that came up was the groundwater, and the groundwater coming from Aberdeen and going up that hill, it's at least 100 feet that you rise up, and all the water that's collected in the circle and where the new construction is could flow by gravity. No pumps, just gravity. Take it, and wherever they were going to put it to start with, that's where it would end up. I guess I'm suggesting that the article says that we, as a community, haven't presented anything to DOT as a solution. Up to this point, we've relied on them to give us solutions, and we've said, no, I'm sorry, that doesn't meet our needs. It doesn't meet what we'd really like. I'd like to suggest that this be presented to them as a solution, and let them say no or yes, one way or the other. But this solves it solves a lot of our problems, actually. If we could see the last slide represents what the circle would look like when everything's done. It's back to vegetation. The pine trees would still be there. And the construction is not a tunnel. You can't tunnel in sand. It's a U-shaped with a roof. So they construct the U, and then they put concrete over the top of it, and then we can plant. It's been done many places already in the United States, so it's not something that we're dreaming up. This is a functional thing that's being done all the time. I guess I would like to see us, consider that for them. Is there any questions?
We don't usually take questions, John, but if there were a question on this particular point, you've made it well. Would the council wish to ask any questions of Mr. Root tonight? Jeff?
I guess just from a historical standpoint, I did share this idea with DOT in about the 2017 timeframe, and I don't recall the specific response, but they told me they gave me a negative response.
And John, your response when you spoke to DOT was what, neutral, or did they ever give you a thumbs up or thumbs
Well,
down?
I guess my feeling is that, yeah, we've had the conversations, but as a community, we've not said, hey, this is something that we'd like you to consider, and let them say out in the public, no.
Thank you.
And if there's any, I have a model, so after the meeting, if anybody has any questions, you can come and look.
Thank you, John.
I do have a question. We've talked about tunnel. I'd never have heard about this U with the concrete on top. You say it's used in other places in the United States?
Yes,
Can you tell us where?
Boston, the Boston road that they did downtown in Boston, that was done that way.
Big.
There's a number. It's not something that's done new.
Now, why is that? Why does that work where a tunnel doesn't work? You said a tunnel would not work.
Well, it's in sand.
Okay.
The community is sand. It's sand.
Where the sand hills.
It's difficult to put a tunnel in there, but they do that too. They do that kind of work in New York. In the Brooklyn side of New York is sand, and they do put tunnels in there for the subways, but it's very expensive to do, and we don't need to go that deep.
What's your background? What is your background?
What is my background?
Were you an engineer?
It's not engineering.
Okay. Thanks.
More problem solving, so that's the concept rather than how to do it.
John, thank you for your time. I'll just remark that
Thank you for your time.
among John's background is one of the key volunteers in the archives for, I might put decades on that, and thank you very much. Teresa Johns?
Good evening. I'm Teresa Johns, 25 Verona McLean. I would just like to make some general comments about the traffic circle and the small area plans. To quote the band Rush, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. It seems in the matters of both the traffic circle and the small area plans, you are continuing to not make a choice. I was stunned to read in the Pilot Sunday that the Village of Pinehurst has not given an answer to NCDOT about traffic circle options, and that VOP leadership didn't seem to think there was a deadline. I was here for the NCDOT presentation, and I'm pretty sure they said this was not an open-ended offer of money, and if VOP didn't answer or accept, they would go on to other projects in the state. Concerning small area plans, I am opposed to a moratorium extension for the small area plans. Pat has said many times he'd like the consultants on those plans here to answer questions. Was it in their contract to do that? If so, and they are refusing, then seek legal action against them. I looked up a definition of consultants. It says they offer advice and provide expert opinions and analysis. Nowhere in there did it say that they make decisions. That's your job. So I'm going to steal a quote from Bill Belichick, do your job. If you're unable or unwilling to do your job, then please resign your positions and quit kicking these important decisions down the road. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other persons who wish to speak under public comments to the Village Council tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on to a motion to adjourn the regular meeting and move to the work session. Is there a motion?
I move to adjourn the regular meeting.
That's a motion by Lydia Bosch. Is there a
Second.
Second by Pat Pizzella. We'll adjourn the regular meeting. We'll move into the work session at 6 o'clock. Take a little quick break, okay?